These are the ruins of the old Bloak Mill. This was a corn mill that stood on the Glazert Water, not far from Auchentiber in East Ayrshire. It was close to the now lost village of Bloak. An old map from the late 16th century shows a mill of Bloak, although this may be closer to the Stewarton Water and may be associated with the Bloak Castle, now lost. It's more likely that the Bloak Mill dates from the 18th century. It seems that the kiln for drying the corn, the water wheel itself, and the millstones were enclosed in one long building. It seems that to get a sufficient head of water, that the mill had to have an exceptionally long lade. Just before the water wheel itself, there was a spillway, which meant that the water could be diverted down the spillway if the wheel wasn't actually required to be turning. The water wheel pit can still be seen. It's recorded as being an undershot wheel, which was able to produce 4 horsepower. It's not recorded how many millstones were present at the mill. In January 1860, a terrible accident took place at Bloak Mill. At the time, Robert Steele was the miller. He was oiling the machinery when suddenly the wheel started to turn. He was caught, but his body weight managed to push the machinery out of gear. He extricated himself and dragged his body to the door. Shouting down to the cottage, his family rushed up. He was only able to say, "I'm gone," and expired shortly after. The mill may have belonged to the Laneshore estate. Between the kiln and the cottage, up until 1895, there's a building marked which lay at right angles. There's also a garden that lay in front. The miller's cottage seems to be quite a high status, with a very fine fireplace, with a swee still present. On the eastern end of the cottage there had been a cart shed, but this was unroofed by 1905. The Ordnance Survey maps show that the mill was disused by 1909. However, the miller's cottage continued in use. The last occupant is known to have made willow baskets using the willows that grew beside the Glazert Water. Old photographs from 1965 show that at that time the miller's house still had its roof, and also it shows that the gable end of the main mill building has been greatly robbed of its stone since that time. The mill would have ground the corn from the local farms. The flour would have supplied the farms themselves, as well as the small hamlet of Bloak, now lost, and the village of Auchentiber.